What's up, everybody? Esoteric Eddie here. Namaste. I'm going to be responding to a video of Dan McClellan's in which he reacted to a video clip of me on the Concrete podcast. In his reaction, he basically overall disagreed with what I had to say and corrected me on a few things. And I respect him for that. I think it's cool. And it's kind of funny and interesting because this video clip and that interview that I did has been circulated all around the internet on so many different platforms. And I'm just happy that people are thinking and having intellectual conversations about these things. So I'm going to react or respond to just a few things that McClellan had to say about me and that interview that I think are important. And Nakash is a double meaning word. It can mean serpent, but it can also mean wise one.
So Nachash is not being used instead of serpent. It's the generic Hebrew word for serpent. And it does not also mean wise. I think this creator is a little confused because in Genesis 3:1, where the serpent is introduced to us, the text then goes on to describe the serpent as Arum, which means cunning, wise, or crafty, because they get around and they're always down. So it's not that Nachash means serpent and crafty. That's simply not true. It's that the text describes the serpent as cunning, wise, or crafty, and this creator doesn't really understand Hebrew.
All right. So I am not a scholar of Hebrew. I'm not a scholar of anything. I am a high school dropout, but I am somebody who has spent just about half of their life now studying, writing, and creating content having to do with the esoteric, occult, and conspiratorial. So I do take this stuff serious and I try to be as studious as I can, but I make mistakes. I'm just a student, pretty much. I'm just here to learn and present that knowledge that I learned. So I'm just an ordinary guy with extraordinary passions. Okay, so the whole idea of the Nakash. So, all right, so I was wrong, and I can admit that I was wrong about the Nakash not meaning wise, but the Nakash, the serpent, is still referred to as being wise. And I think that's important because a lot of Assyriologists and scholars over the decades and century have concluded that the reason that we are told Adam and Eve were I guess tricked or whatever by the specific being is because this specific being was influenced by the Sumerian god Enki, who is undoubtedly referred to as wise and who is undoubtedly represented by the serpent symbolism throughout history. So I believe, as many other early Assyriologists, that this serpent, this Nakash, was a rendition of the Enki archetype. So although I was wrong and incorrect in what I was stating, I don't think I was wrong in my message in that this Nakash was influenced by the Sumerian mythology, specifically by the god Enki. God says they have become like one of us. And again, if you understand the ancient historical context, who they were talking about, these us were the Anunnaki.
So the Anunnaki have absolutely nothing to do with the historical record here. Anunnaki is an Akkadian transliteration of a Sumerian word that refers to a specific group of deities within the Eastern Semitic pantheon of Mesopotamia.
Okay, so this whole idea that the Anunnaki have nothing to do with the Bible, I think that's disingenuous and at worst naive, because to me it is blatantly obvious that the writers of the Torah were writing with the ancient Anunnaki mythologies in mind. Now, the early Israelites were essentially Canaanites. They were a section of Canaanites that broke off and started their own thing. And this is corroborated in the Bible. So they were coming out of Canaan with that ancient polytheistic mindset. And so to me, the B'nai Elohim were just a rendition of the old Anunnaki story. And this is also understood by one of the most prolific Bible commentators who I spoke about in my book, The Anunnaki Theorem. Now, Malbim was a Russian born rabbi and scholar of Hebrew from the 19th century, who was also a prolific Bible commentator, who spoke on this idea of the B'nai Elohim. And in one of his essays titled Evolution of an Idea, The Fallen Ones, he says, the B'nai Elohim are the ones that it said they fell from heaven. It is known that in all the ancient stories of the nations, including the Sumerians, they told that in the early days of the king over the kingdom, B'nai Elohim came down from the heavens to the earth and ruled over it and married women from the Banat Adam. And he also says that similar stories are found with the first kings of Egypt and Greece, which began from gods and half gods that walked on high mountains. So again, you have Malbim, one of the most prolific Bible commentators of all time, definitely the 19th century, realizing and understanding that this idea of gods and Elohim was not new. This is something that was happening all around ancient cultures, and that originally began with the Sumerians. And so, again, being that the early Israelites were actually Canaanites, we can understand that these Canaanites were coming out of that old world with the knowledge of their ancestors, being the Sumerians, Assyrians, Akkadians, who worshiped the Anunnaki. And in this article here, titled Who Were the Canaanites by Austin Klein, who has an MA at Princeton University and a BA at University of Pennsylvania, that the earliest definite reference to the Canaanites is a Sumerian text in Syria from the 18th century. So again, the Israelites were born out of this old polytheistic worldview, that worshipped the Anunnaki, and this is corroborated in the Bible time and time again. In Isaiah, we're told that Hillel ben Shahar, or Lucifer, that this Lucifer character wanted to take over the throne of God, and more specifically, that he wanted to sit upon the mount of the congregation on the sides of the north. Now, that's a pretty random thing to want and to do, but we are told by Isaiah this specifically because Isaiah was referencing an old Canaanite idea and mythology. The congregation on the sides of the north was referencing an old Canaanite mythology of a place known as Mount Zaphon. In the Canaanite mythologies, we're told that the gods headed by El congregated on Mount Zaphon, and Zaphon means in Hebrew north, or Mount of the North. So again, the Bible is telling us that these Elohim, these gods, were actually Canaanite deities who I believe, and many other scholars and people alike believe, were just a rendition of the Sumerian Anunnaki. And we are told in the Bible that prior to Abraham, who is the patriarch of all the Abrahamic religions, that the people worshipped other gods. We are told that Abraham's own father worshipped other gods. Okay, and who were these other gods? The Anunnaki, because all of these other nations worshipped Anunnaki. That's who they were worshiping. And this is proven in the Bible and out of the Bible. Example here is Abraham's time period, right? So many theologians and Christians alike agree that Abraham lived during the time of Hammurabi. I'm using this basic article here from newcreation.blog. And in this article, like most theologians and Christians, they agree that Abraham lived during the time of Hammurabi. And that's fine. That's not very important. But what is important is that Hammurabi was very integral and significant in history, and we are all told about him in high school. And if we go to Hammurabi's law code, for example, in this version translated by the great L.W. King, we see that in the very opening line, he states, when Anu, the sublime king of the Anunnaki, and Bel, the Lord of heaven and earth, who decreed the fate of the land, assigned to Marduk, the overruling son of Ea, god of righteousness, dominion over earthly man, and made him great among the Igigi, they called Babylon by his illustrious name, made it great on earth, and founded an everlasting kingdom in it, so on and so forth. So, in the very opening lines of the Code of Hammurabi, who lived during the time of Abraham, we see a reverence for Anu and the Anunnaki. And again, we are told in the Bible that Abraham's own father, Terah, worshipped other gods. Who were these other gods? None other than the Anunnaki. So to say the Bible has nothing to do with the Anunnaki, again, I think is disingenuous and just naive. I mean, it's obvious, it's blatantly obvious that these Israelites, these early Israelites who were Canaanites, were writing with their ancestors' mythologies in mind. So, am I correct about everything? No. Am I onto something? I think yes. And basically, my message is that for the first 5,000 years of our human existence in this modern timeline of 7,000 years, we as humans worshiped the Anunnaki. And a small portion of us who broke off from that and became Israelites decided to do away with all of that and create a new law, a new story based on all of those stories, which created the Torah and thus Judaism and thus monotheism and the later Judeo Christian Abrahamic faiths. That's basically my main message. So, shout out to McClellan, shout out to everybody, and hope you have a great day. Peace.